Hi everybody. So I am going to be running through the lab. I do have all 6 resin codes with me, and I'm going to show you guys kind of what I collected, and then we're going to go through the actual lab procedure. You guys will take down any observations, and I'll try to be kind of like vocal about like what I'm feeling, and then hopefully you guys can kind of see what I'm seeing. If not, I'll let you know. So I'm just going to go through what I have, what I found around my house, and then we'll go through the lab. So for starters, for resin code 1, it's PET or PETE, I do have a vitamin water bottle. So kind of like squishing it, it's really hard to squish. It's pretty tough. It's see-through, and when I scratch it with my nail, nothing really happens. So it's pretty smooth. For resin code 2, I do have this old Gain detergent bottle. It's a little squishier. Ooh, I'm trying not to squish the soap. It is a little squishier than the vitamin water bottle. It's not see-through, but when I scratch it, it kind of leaves like an indent, which is kind of hard to see, but it leaves like a little shiny coat or an indent. For resin code number 3, I did find this like really old aloe vera gel, and it's pretty easy to squeeze. Again, not as hard as the vitamin water, but I would say it's even easier than the Gain bottle. It is see-through, so it's clear. And when I scratch it, it's smooth. And then for resin code number 4, I have this cotton ball bag that I found. It's kind of like an opaque look, but I think at one point this was supposed to be see-through. It's just really old. So this one is like almost, I guess, see-through or maybe opaque. It could be from all the scratches, just from being like moved around and crumpled a bunch of times. So when I do scratch it, it does leave a mark. And then for resin code 5, I do have my old Dunkin' cup from yesterday. So this one is really easily, I'm sure you guys know, Dunkin' cups are very easy to squeeze. So it's pretty flimsy. It is see-through and also very smooth because it doesn't do anything when I scratch it with my nail. And then finally for resin code 6, I do have a Solo cup. So this, I would say, is even easier to squeeze than the Dunkin' cup. It's pretty flimsy, and when I scratch it, nothing really happens, but there is like a little indent. When I scratch it, it's very smooth, but again, that indent pops up. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut 1 inch by 1 inch squares out of all of these, and then we will run through the lab. All right, hi everybody. So I'm just gonna go through the lab with you guys. I'm just gonna go through every resin code, and then we're gonna do all 4 kind of like trials, I guess. So the 4 substances that I have that I'm gonna dip my plastic in are water. I have rubbing alcohol, I have olive oil, and I have acetone or nail polish remover. As I'm doing this, you guys should be going along and kind of filling in that data table. So you'll fill in the plastic object. So this, I'll just at the start of every resin code, I will let you know what resin code it is and where the plastic came from, or like what my object was. And then you'll go through the water test, alcohol test, oil test, acetone test, and we're not going to do the wire test. So I'm just going to do the first 4. All right, so to start off, I do have resin code 1. This was my water bottle, my vitamin water bottle. So when I dunk it in the water, it does try to float, but once I press it down, it does sink to the bottom. So this one does sink to the bottom of the water. It is not a floater. So next up, I do have the rubbing alcohol. So the rubbing alcohol, we're also going to see if it sinks or if it floats. This one directly sank to the bottom, does not try to come up to the top at all. So it does sink in that rubbing alcohol. Next up, I do have oil. So in the oil test, again, we're seeing if it sinks or if it floats. This did sink. All right, so last up for the first resin code is acetone. So that's my nail polish remover. Sorry, I'm trying to wipe off as much of this oil as I possibly can. So for this test, we are just trying to see, does the plastic keep its shape or does it degrade in the acetone? So it might start feeling gooey, or it's going to probably just keep its shape. Well, we will see. So this one I am going to leave it in for just a second. So again, we're not seeing if it sinks or if it floats. This one, we're just testing to see if the plastic will be almost like eaten up by the acetone or not. So this one, I'm going to try and like bend it. It looks like it's staying pretty sturdy. This one was, remember, the really tough plastic to bend. It's keeping its shape very well. It's not getting gooey or anything. So I would say this one's keeping its shape. Next up, we have resin code 2. This was from my Gain detergent bottle. I did cut my inch square and wash off the soap from it so we wouldn't see that. First up in the water, looks like it floats. So even when I push it all the way to the bottom, if I can get it down there, it does try to float back up and it makes it up. So this does float in water. Next up is the rubbing alcohol. So again, does it sink or does it float? This looks like it sank right to the bottom. So this is not trying to come back up. We have olive oil next. So in the olive oil, when I press it all the way down, it looks like it is staying at the bottom. It's not even trying to come up. So it sank. All right, and then our last test, which is the acetone or the nail polish remover. We're gonna remember not see if it sinks or if it floats, but we're trying to see if the plastic degrades. So I'm gonna leave it in there again for like another second. So again, if it degrades, you'll kind of feel it getting a little rubbery. You'll feel it getting maybe flimsier. I get it, and it actually feels like it is keeping its shape. I can scratch it, and it still stays the same. So this plastic does keep its shape. And this was the Gain bottle, so this was resin code number 2. All right, next up is resin code number 3. So this was that really old aloe vera bottle. So first up, we will dip it in water. Oop, and that actually sank right to the bottom. Do that again for you. It just sinks right to the bottom, so it doesn't even attempt to float. So in the rubbing alcohol, let's see again if it sinks or if it floats. And that again goes directly to the bottom. It doesn't even try. Doesn't even try to float. All right, so next up is the oil. So the olive oil, again, does it sink or does it float? And once you push it down, it doesn't even attempt to come up. So that does sink. All right, and then finally in the acetone. So again, we're not seeing does it sink or does it float. We're seeing does it keep its shape or does it start to degrade in the acetone. When we drop this in, I'm gonna leave it in for just a second. We're gonna see if maybe it gets a little flimsier. Maybe it's getting kind of gooey and gross. Feel pretty gross, actually. It feels kind of gooey. Mine isn't like crazy gooey, but I know some of them get really nasty. So I would say this is like starting to degrade. So on the very outer edges, it's starting to feel like kind of like snotty. It's kind of gross. So kind of gooey on the sides. I'm sure if we left it in there for a little while longer, it would get pretty gooey in there. So that's kind of gross. So it is starting to degrade. All right, you guys, next up is resin code number 4. So this was that cotton ball bag. I was able to kind of like pre-dunk it in the rubbing alcohol and get that white paint off that was on it. So now you can kind of see what's going on with it. So when we do dunk it into the water, it is trying super hard to stay afloat. So I would say this is floating. So even when I push it down, it tries to come back up and eventually makes its way up. So in water, resin code number 4, or that cotton ball bag, it does float. In the rubbing alcohol, it kind of like sits there and floats in the water. It doesn't like sink to the bottom. What it is doing is it's like floating like just under the top. So I would say it's floating. All right, and the olive oil. Let's see. So in the olive oil, when I poke it down, nope, it is sunk. Sometimes it takes a minute for them to come back up, but nope, this one's sunk. All right, so last up, we do have the acetone. I'll let it sit there for a second. This actually feels fine. It is holding up perfectly fine, which so this guy is keeping its shape. Feels the same, doesn't feel gooey. Some leftover olive oil on there for you. So the nail polish remover bag, or sorry, the cotton ball bag or resin code number 4, that does keep its shape. All right, so we're on to number 5. This is resin code number 5. This was my Dunkin' cup. I cut a little piece of plastic out without any of the paint. So when we dunk it in the water, is it gonna sink or is it gonna float? So when I push it down, it tries to sink for a minute, thinks about it, and then it comes back up. So I would say this does float. In the rubbing alcohol, let's see what it does. Does it sink or float? This one. It's like not quite to the bottom. It like hovers right under the top. So I would say it floats. And the olive oil. So the olive oil, press it down a little bit. Looks like it's trying to sink. So I would say this guy floats. Great. So in the acetone it goes. I'm just going to give it a second to kind of... So it is feeling a little, starting to feel a little like gooey. Nothing too crazy, but again, if we soaked it a little longer, I'm guessing it would totally degrade. So I would say degrade for this one. All right, so this was resin code number 5. It was the Dunkin' cup, and yeah. All right, you guys, last but not least, I have the blue Solo cup. So we're gonna do the water first. We're gonna see if it sinks or if it floats. So it looks like it's trying to float. Oop, pushing it in. And it sank right to the bottom. So this guy does sink, it does not float. In the rubbing alcohol, let's see what it does. Again, does it sink or does it float? That sank right to the bottom when I dropped it. It wasn't even trying to float. So even if I bring it up, it just sinks directly to the bottom. In the olive oil, taking a bit to sink, but it is sinking, actively sinking. It's not even floating. So that sank as well. And then I'm gonna try and rub as much olive oil as I can off. We're gonna set it in the acetone. We're gonna see if it sinks or floats. For this one, I am scratching it and it feels the same. It is keeping its shape. And it doesn't look like it's degrading, so it looks like it's keeping its shape. So this was resin code 6. It was the blue Solo cup. All right, you guys, so now that I have completed the lab for you guys, or with you guys should have taken data on everything that I was saying, kind of recording my observations. Maybe you saw something in the video, I don't know. You're gonna use that data to help you answer the last 4 questions. So there are 4 questions at the bottom of the lab. Number 1 is which type of plastic or which resin codes sink in water? So you guys should have taken notes. You can refer to your data table on that one. Number 2, if oil is less dense than water and alcohol, which type of plastic is the least dense? So use that data table again to answer that. Number 3, why would it not be wise to make a canoe paddle out of PVC? What kind of plastic might you use instead? So instead of PVC for that canoe paddle, which type of plastic would you use? And why would it not be wise to use one? Use a canoe paddle made out of PVC. And then number 4, you are running out of fingernail polish remover, so you decide to transfer it into a smaller bottle. The next day you notice that you now have a leaky, gooey mess. What do you think is the main ingredient in the fingernail polish remover? What kind of plastic do you think the bottle was made out of? So again, use that data table. All these questions you can refer to that data table for. If you guys have any questions on those or you're kind of struggling to answer one, go ahead and send me and Ms. Franny an email, and whoever answers it first can get right back to you. Other than that, have a great last academic week, you guys. And if we don't talk after this, have a great summer.